The galaxy, in its vast, swirling expanse of stars and planets, had found a semblance of peace under the guiding hand of the Intergalactic Alliance. Formed over millennia, this coalition comprised of the most powerful and wise species ever to traverse the stars. Each race brought its own strengths to the Alliance: technological marvels from the Zenithar, unparalleled diplomacy from the Quori, the scientific intellect of the Cathari, and many more. Together, they had woven a delicate tapestry of balance, where conflict was rare, disputes were settled in council chambers, and war was a relic of a more primitive past. But the day humanity broke free from their small blue homeworld was the day that balance cracked. Humanity was not a species the galaxy had prepared for. They were something entirely different, something more primal. For centuries, Earth was no more than a footnote in the vast archives of the galactic civilizations, a tiny primitive planet orbiting a yellow sun. The Alliance had watched Earth with idle curiosity, fascinated by the flickers of intelligence, but dismissive of the chaotic tendencies of its inhabitants. And so, when humanity finally shattered the bonds of gravity and reached into the cosmos, it was as if a beast had been let loose among the stars. The first contact with humanity was not a peaceful diplomatic meeting, as it had been with other species. It was a sudden, violent clash on the outskirts of Alliance space. A group of human explorers, driven by equal parts curiosity and recklessness, stumbled upon a resource-rich planet in the Gora system, territory claimed by the Terran Empire. The humans, undeterred by the alien presence, staked their claim on the world as if the laws of the galaxy didn't apply to them. When the Terran attempted to negotiate, offering terms of trade and peaceful coexistence, humanity responded with something the Terran had not encountered in eons: brute force. The humans unleashed kinetic weapons, primitive railguns and missiles by Alliance standards, against the Terran, whose energy shields had never encountered such raw, unrelenting impacts. Their ships shattered like glass under the relentless human assault, their defensive fleets overwhelmed by the savage precision of humanity's tactics. The humans did not fight for territory or glory. They fought to dominate, to claim, to conquer. And with that first act of violence, a wave of fear rippled through the Alliance. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the stars. Species that had once looked down upon Earth as a mere curiosity began to see humanity as a rising storm. They were unlike any civilization the galaxy had ever known, not because of their technology, which was crude but effective, but because of their sheer unpredictability and disregard for galactic norms. The Zenithar described humanity as a wildfire raging unchecked, while the Cathari scientists labeled them a predatory anomaly. Where the Alliance believed in order, humanity thrived in chaos. Humanity's arrival in the galaxy triggered a paradigm shift in warfare. The Alliance had become comfortable, their wars distant memories replaced by skirmishes and diplomacy. Battles were once fought like games of chess, where each move was calculated, strategies carefully constructed, and every loss minimized. Humanity tore that script to pieces. They did not play by the rules. They invented new ones on the fly. Their soldiers fought with a ferocity that defied logic, using tactics that left even the most seasoned generals of the Alliance bewildered. Where the Zorlan used slow, methodical fleet maneuvers, humans used blitz tactics, striking hard and fast, overwhelming their enemies before they had a chance to react. When the telepathic Idari tried to use their mind control techniques to turn human troops against their own, they discovered that human minds were a chaotic storm, impossible to penetrate without succumbing to madness. The Idari fell back in horror, unable to comprehend the twisted mix of fury, determination, and raw survival instinct that drove humanity forward. Humanity's greatest strength, however, was their adaptability. They learned from every encounter, evolving faster than any species had ever seen. Every loss on the battlefield was a lesson. Every enemy tactic a puzzle to be solved. They had no sacred traditions, no ancient strategies they were bound to follow. They were innovators of destruction. Where diplomacy failed, they used aggression. Where alliances wavered, they used deception. The galaxy watched in awe and fear as humanity transformed warfare into an art form, turning their lack of technological sophistication into an advantage that defied all logic. It soon became clear that humanity's presence was more than a disruption. it was a threat to the very fabric of the alliance. Trade agreements turned into black market dealings under humanity's influence. Once stable border systems erupted into territorial disputes, and entire sectors were plunged into chaos as old grudges were reignited by the humans' relentless manipulation. Their capacity for war was matched only by their cunning, as they played the other species against one another, sowing discord where there had been peace. The tipping point came when humanity orchestrated the fall of Valaris, a neutral planet that had stood as a symbol of peace for over 3,000 years. In a bold move that stunned the galaxy, humanity tricked the warring factions of the Tarviks and the Vril Nori into believing that the other had launched a devastating attack. By the time the Alliance uncovered the ruse, Valaris lay in ruins, its once thriving cities reduced to rubble. The galaxy finally realized that humanity was not merely a species in need of guidance. They were a force of nature that could not be controlled. The ruling body of the Intergalactic Alliance convened in an emergency session. Never before had there been such unity in their purpose. Species that had feuded for millennia stood side by side, united in their fear of humanity's boundless aggression. The discussion was not about whether humanity should be stopped, but how. Ideas of negotiation were dismissed outright. Humanity could not be reasoned with. Some suggested extermination, but the mere thought of attempting to wipe out a species so adept at war chilled even the bravest commanders. In the end, the Council's decision was both desperate and ingenious. They would not destroy humanity, they would imprison them. An ancient containment technology once used to seal away the monstrous void wraiths was repurposed to create an impenetrable barrier around the Milky Way galaxy. The great engines of confinement, powered by the combined might of the Alliance's most advanced energy sources, were activated in a ceremony both solemn and fearful. Humanity's cradle became their cage, a cosmic prison from which they could never escape. As the barrier sealed the Milky Way, a ripple of energy washed across the galaxy, signaling humanity's forced isolation. Planets in the Milky Way became unreachable, communications severed, and warp routes to Earth disappeared from galactic star charts. The Alliance declared the Milky Way a forbidden zone, a place where no ships would venture under threat of extermination. The memory of humanity was to be purged from the collective consciousness of the galaxy, reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered by the elders to their children. But humanity did not go quietly. In the final moments before the barrier closed, they sent one last message to the galaxy. A message broadcast in every known language, to every star system within reach. "We will remember," the message said, echoing across the stars like a vow. "You may cage us, you may forget us, but we will not forget you. And when we return, we will show you why we are the predators of the dark." The sealing of humanity became the galaxy's greatest secret, its darkest sin. Species who had once shared the stars now shared the shame of their decision, knowing that they had condemned an entire civilization out of fear. As centuries passed, the memory of humanity faded into the mists of legend, their story told only in hushed voices. To most, they were a myth, a forgotten tale of a species too dangerous to roam free. But to those who knew the truth, humanity remained a haunting echo in the darkness, a reminder of the chaos that once shattered the peace of the stars. The galaxy turned, its ancient wheels of time grinding on, as 500 years passed since the sealing of humanity. In that span, the Milky Way, now isolated and silent, became a forgotten echo, a locked tomb holding the legend of a species that once thrived on chaos and war. The Intergalactic Alliance flourished during these centuries. Peace and prosperity reigned across the cosmos, as its member races turned their attention to the arts of creation, expanding their knowledge, enriching their cultures, and deepening their commitment to unity. The Alliance prided itself on this era of unprecedented stability. Children were born into a world where war was a distant memory, something spoken of in tales meant to teach the values of patience, diplomacy, and cooperation. The scars left by humanity's chaotic rampage had faded into myth, dismissed by many as stories exaggerated by frightened ancestors. No one truly believed that a species so primitive and barbaric could ever have posed a genuine threat to the great civilizations of the galaxy. But the universe has a way of turning silence into a storm. And in the darkest, most remote corners of space, the whispers of doom began to rise, a murmur of dread that would soon crescendo into the galaxy's greatest nightmare. The shadows of a forgotten force stirred, reaching out from the cosmic abyss. An ancient enemy was awakening, the Xynar Dominion. The Xynar were not a species that merely sought conquest. They were an extinction-level threat. Their emergence was not announced with negotiations or threats. It came like a phantom tide, sweeping across the galactic rim with a methodical and terrifying silence. First, it was the small outposts on the fringes of Alliance space that went dark. Isolated colonies whose distress signals flickered for a moment before vanishing entirely. Then came the larger settlements, planets teeming with life, which fell into eerie stillness, their communications cut as if they had never existed. The Xynar war machine was unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. Their fleets appeared out of nowhere, blackened vessels that seemed to absorb the very light of the stars they surrounded. These were no ordinary ships. They were sentient machines, constructs that operated with a cold, calculated intelligence. They did not simply destroy worlds, they consumed them. Planets were stripped of their atmospheres, their resources harvested, and their biospheres reduced to ash. The stars themselves became targets, their energy drained to power the endless hunger of the Xynar. No Alliance defenses could slow the advance of the Xynar. Entire fleets mobilized against them were obliterated in moments, their mighty vessels crumbling under the relentless assault of the Xynar's antimatter lances and quantum disruptors. The Alliance's most powerful weapons, those that could lay waste to planets, were met with contemptuous ease by the Xynar's adaptive shielding. Strategic command centers, built deep within the crusts of fortified worlds, fell silent as their defenses were hacked, overridden, and turned against them. Entire star systems fell into shadow, their suns extinguished by the energy-leeching engines of the Xynar, who moved on to the next target without pause, leaving nothing but cold, lifeless voids in their wake. The Xynar were not creatures of flesh and bone. They were a fusion of machine and mind, something older than the Alliance's oldest civilizations, and far more ruthless. Their origin was a mystery buried in the deepest archives of forgotten galaxies, their presence whispered only in the myths of ancient races that had long vanished from the universe. Even the galaxy's oldest scholars, the venerable elders of the Zenithar, could find only fragments of references to the Xynar in their star-spanning libraries. These fragments told of a race so advanced that they had transcended physical form, existing now as an amalgam of conscious machines, predators that viewed biological life not as beings to conquer, but as infestations to eradicate. The Xynar did not seek dominion or empire. They sought a galaxy cleansed of life, a universe purified by fire. To them, biological civilizations were a corruption of the cosmic order, something to be purged until only the cold, perfect silence of the void remained. This ideology drove them forward with a singular purpose, a mission to reduce the galaxy to its original, uninhabited state. Despair spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Alliance. Once proud generals and fleet commanders who had never known defeat in their lifetimes were faced with an enemy that defied all logic. The Alliance's most brilliant strategists were reduced to silence, their every maneuver anticipated and countered by the Xynar's hive-mind intelligence. Panic began to creep into even the highest levels of the Alliance Council as they realized that the Xynar's advance was not just an invasion, it was an extinction. With each passing day, the Alliance's options dwindled. The Xynar were closing in, and the galaxy's strongest defenses were crumbling like ancient ruins before a rising tide. The great bastion of Telora, a fortress world encased in neutronium and guarded by the most formidable defense systems known to the galaxy, was breached in less than an hour. Its legendary fleets, which had once repelled the deadliest threats from the galactic core, were reduced to scattered debris orbiting a dead star. The Council of Elders was now faced with a dilemma that transcended politics and pride. It was a matter of survival. In a secret chamber on the planet Quol 9, the most powerful leaders of the galaxy convened in utter desperation. For the first time in 5 centuries, their debate turned to a topic that was both feared and forbidden, a name that carried with it the weight of the galaxy's greatest shame and a terror they had long buried in the past. Humanity. The elders sat in silence as the name echoed through the chamber. No one spoke at first, each leader wrestling with the memory of a species they had once sealed away, not out of hatred, but out of fear. Humanity had been the galaxy's wild card, a force of chaos that did not fit into the structured order the Alliance had built. But now they were faced with a force far worse. A relentless exterminator that threatened to end not just their civilizations, but all life itself. High Chancellor Valari of the Zenithar broke the silence, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve. We condemned humanity to the Milky Way because we feared what they could do. They were too unpredictable, too savage in their ways, but they were warriors, true warriors. They thrived in chaos, and perhaps chaos is what we need now. But to unleash them now? Objected Kalor the Unbroken, leader of the Uidari, his eyes blazing with uncertainty. They were dangerous before, unpredictable. Their capacity for destruction was why we caged them. If we release them now, we might solve one problem only to create another, even worse. The debate raged on, filled with fear, logic, and the ghostly echo of humanity's shadow. Yet as the grim reports continued to flood in, world after world consumed by the Xynar, hope dwindled. They knew the truth, the one undeniable fact they could no longer ignore. The Alliance was losing, and the galaxy was dying. Finally, Grand Arbiter Saloon, the eldest of the Cathari and the wisest among them, spoke with a voice that resonated like the whisper of time itself. Humanity is a double-edged sword, but what choice do we have? We have built our civilization on order, on balance, on rules and reason. And the Xynar defy all of that. They are beyond our understanding. We need something equally beyond their comprehension. We need humanity's chaos. We need their madness. In that moment, the decision was made, a choice born not of courage, but of desperation. The Alliance would do the unthinkable. And as the Council prepared to reach out to their long-buried enemy, a chilling realization swept through them. Humanity had been born in the crucible of war, tempered by chaos and sharpened by centuries of rage. They were the predators that the galaxy had tried to forget, the force of nature that had been caged for far too long. The Alliance had no illusions. They were about to unleash the most dangerous weapon the galaxy had ever known, a weapon that could turn the tide against the Xynar, but also had the potential to reshape the galaxy in ways they could not predict. They were about to set free the fury of a species that had been sealed away in the darkness, waiting for the day when they would be called upon again. The whispers of doom had become a roar, and as the Xynar closed in, the galaxy's last hope lay in the hands of those who were once deemed too dangerous to remember. The seal on the Milky Way would be broken, and humanity would rise again, not as saviors, not as conquerors, but as the storm that the galaxy could no longer control. The shield surrounding the Milky Way, a colossal construct woven from the deepest mysteries of ancient cosmic technology, was finally dismantled. For 5 centuries it had served as an unbreakable barrier, sealing humanity in their cosmic cage, keeping the rest of the galaxy safe from their volatile nature. But now the arcane locks were undone. The chains that had bound an entire civilization had been broken. Humanity was no longer a ghost, a whispered myth told to frighten children. They were being summoned, called upon by the very powers that had once feared them more than death itself. As the Alliance's ships breached the barrier, what they found was not the primitive, war-torn species they had once banished. Humanity had evolved in their exile. Their technology, once a crude and brutal expression of their survival instincts, had advanced far beyond what the galaxy had once known. Earth's skies were now pierced by orbital shipyards that dwarfed anything the Alliance had seen before, and the gleaming cities on its surface shimmered with an unnatural intensity. Massive defense platforms hovered like silent sentinels, their weapons humming with energy that made even the most hardened Alliance generals nervous. But perhaps most disturbing was not what humanity had built, but what they had become. The Alliance's historians had expected to find a species broken by isolation, a civilization fractured by their imprisonment. Instead, they found unity, strength, and above all else, a festering hatred. A deep, abiding rage that had smoldered over centuries, waiting for this very moment to reignite. The moment the barrier fell, the Milky Way sprang back into the galaxy's awareness. It was like a wound that had healed over, only to be torn open again, bleeding with memories of past horrors. The Alliance ships approached with caution, like prey tiptoeing into a predator's den. They were greeted not with fanfare or relief, but with cold silence. Earth's surface was a fortress planet, surrounded by layers of orbital defenses and battle stations. It was a far cry from the Earth the Alliance had once known, a planet on the verge of chaos, driven by desperation and war. This new Earth was something else entirely, hardened, prepared, and waiting. The Revenant, humanity's flagship, appeared on the Alliance's scanners like a specter of death. It dwarfed the Alliance vessels in size and power, bristling with weapons whose designs defied the galaxy's understanding of physics. Its hull was forged from an alloy that absorbed the light of nearby stars, giving the ship a foreboding, almost ominous presence as it drifted into orbit around Earth. Aboard the Revenant was humanity's supreme commander, Darius Kane, a name that had not yet become known to the rest of the galaxy, but soon would be etched in the annals of history. Kane was a man forged in the crucible of Earth's unending conflict. He was born generations after the sealing of the Milky Way, but the stories of humanity's betrayal at the hands of the Alliance had been passed down to him, as they had to all humans. His eyes, like the cold steel of humanity's war machines, reflected not the despair of exile but the burning desire for vengeance. He was the embodiment of humanity's wrath, silent, calculating, and relentless. As the Alliance delegation descended toward Earth, their ships hovering like shadows above the planet, the tension was palpable. Aboard the Revenant, Kane watched their approach with a predator's patience, his face unreadable as the delegation made contact. In the council chamber of the flagship, under the cold gaze of holographic displays showing the galaxy in turmoil, the meeting began. The Alliance's envoys, an assortment of diplomats and generals from various species, stood before Kane like supplicants at the feet of a judge. The eldest among them, High Consul Elareth of the Quori, spoke first. His voice trembled with a mix of desperation and carefully concealed fear. "Supreme Commander Kane," Elareth began, his tone formal but tinged with urgency, "we come to you not as enemies but as allies, perhaps as friends, if you will accept us as such. The galaxy faces a threat unlike any it has ever known. The Xynar Dominion is spreading like a plague, consuming entire star systems. Our defenses, they are failing. No force in the galaxy has the experience, the tenacity, or the capacity for war that humanity possesses. We need your help." For a moment, silence reigned. Kane's eyes, cold and calculating, studied the alien delegates before him. They were a collection of the galaxy's best and brightest, leaders who had known nothing but peace for centuries. They had grown complacent, Kane knew. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival, what it meant to have their backs pressed against the wall with no escape, and now they were learning the hard way. Kane's lips twisted into a smile that was anything but warm. "You locked us away," he said, his voice as sharp as the edge of a blade, "because you feared us. You feared what we could do. You caged us like animals, treated us like a disease to be contained, and now you come to us, begging for our help." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, heavy and final. The Alliance envoys shifted uncomfortably, their diplomatic facades cracking under the weight of Kane's accusation. Elareth, ever the diplomat, stepped forward again, trying to regain control of the conversation. "We regret the actions taken in the past," he said carefully, "but the situation is dire. The Xynar will consume us all if we do not stand together. You must understand, this is not just about revenge, this is about survival, yours and ours." Kane leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he regarded the alien before him. "Survival," he repeated, the word dripping with irony. "We survived just fine without you. We thrived, despite your best efforts to erase us from the galaxy. And now you come crawling back, hoping that we'll save you from the monsters you can't fight." Kane rose from his seat, towering over the envoys as he walked toward the viewport, staring out at the shimmering blue orb of Earth below. "You want humanity's help?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Understand this. Humanity does not forgive. We do not forget. But we are a species born for war. We were forged in the fires of conflict long before we ever left our home world. And if there's one thing we cannot resist, it's a challenge. He turned back to face the delegation, his eyes gleaming with a dark intensity. "You want us to fight the Xynar? Fine, we'll fight. But know this, when we win, and we will win, it will be on our terms. Humanity will not be caged again. We will not be forgotten again. You will give us back what is rightfully ours, our place among the stars. And when the Xynar are no more, the galaxy will remember who saved them." The envoys exchanged nervous glances. They had no choice. The Xynar were closing in, and humanity was their last hope. "We accept your terms," Elareth said finally, his voice a whisper. "Just help us." Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then prepare yourselves," he said, turning back to the viewport. "You've woken the beast, and when humanity goes to war, the galaxy will burn." With the agreement made, humanity mobilized. Across the once isolated Milky Way, the war machine that had been dormant for centuries roared to life. Fleets of starships, bristling with weapons that no longer adhered to the laws of galactic warfare, surged forth from their hidden shipyards. Massive dreadnoughts, capable of reducing entire planets to rubble, were readied for battle. On Earth, Mars, and the colonies scattered throughout the system, soldiers trained for generations in the art of war, prepared for the ultimate test. The Revenant led the charge, its dark hull gleaming as it passed through the breach in the barrier, entering the greater galaxy for the first time in centuries. It was not just a ship, it was a symbol. Humanity had been sealed away, forgotten, and left to rot in their prison. But now, they were free. Free to reclaim their place in the galaxy, free to fight once more. And as the human fleet set their course for the Xynar front, a message was broadcast across the stars, heard by every corner of the galaxy. "We are humanity, and we are coming." The galaxy braced itself for humanity's return, but when the first of their warships emerged from the Milky Way, even the most battle-hardened members of the Alliance were left speechless. The fleet that spread out across the stars was like a tidal wave of darkness, sleek black vessels, forged in the crucible of exile, each one a testament to humanity's rage and ingenuity. Their hulls absorbed light like void black shadows come to life, and they moved with a silent menace like predators stalking prey in the dead of night. Thousands upon thousands of warships gilded forward, each bearing the mark of a civilization that had turned its isolation into a forge, crafting not just weapons but instruments of revenge. The flagship, the Revenant, led the charge, a colossal vessel that seemed to breathe with a life of its own, bristling with weapons that the galaxy had no names for. These were not mere tools of war, they were humanity's wrath given form. The Alliance had expected crude and unsophisticated technology, but what they witnessed defied comprehension. Humanity's arsenal had evolved into something far beyond even their wildest fears. They wielded singularity cannons capable of creating miniature black holes that could rip apart the fabric of space-time, swallowing entire fleets into nothingness. Their neutron warheads didn't just destroy planets, they collapsed them into dead husks, neutron stars that radiated death to anything that ventured too close. But perhaps the most terrifying weapon in their arsenal were the strike drones, unmanned machines of war that seemed to operate with an almost demonic intelligence. These drones were not simply programmed to attack. They adapted, learned, and evolved in real time. As they swarmed across the battlefield, they communicated through quantum-linked AI networks, predicting enemy movements and reacting with brutal precision. They turned every encounter into a strategic puzzle, twisting and shaping the tide of battle to their will. Within moments of their arrival, the Xynar, who had once crushed fleets with impunity, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't anticipate or counter. Their battleships, which had been invincible against the combined might of the Alliance, were now nothing more than targets for humanity's rage. The first real test of humanity's might came at the Cathar Prime system, where the Xynar had established their most fortified stronghold. The Alliance had thrown countless ships at this fortress to no avail, losing entire armadas in futile attempts to breach its defenses. Yet, humanity attacked not with overwhelming force but with cold, calculated precision. Human warships moved like phantoms, slipping through the Xynar defenses, using their singularity cannons to open rifts in the heart of the enemy lines. Massive Xynar dreadnoughts were torn apart, their superstructures crumbling into black holes that swallowed their remains. Strike drones darted through the chaos like demonic hornets, targeting weak points with surgical accuracy, dismantling the Xynar fleet piece by piece. The Xynar, for all their ferocity and technological supremacy, were utterly outmatched. Humanity fought not just to win, but to annihilate. Their tactics were a masterclass in brutality. They used shock and awe, feints and ambushes, always one step ahead of their foes. Every maneuver was designed not merely to kill, but to devastate, to rip apart the enemy's morale as much as their ships. It wasn't just their firepower that made humanity so terrifying, it was their understanding of the psychological game of war. They used the Alliance's fear against them, broadcasting the destruction of the Xynar fleets live to every corner of the galaxy. Messages were hacked, propaganda spread like wildfire. They made sure that every soldier, every citizen in the galaxy, watched as their enemies were reduced to ashes. The name Darius Kane, Supreme Commander of Earth's forces, became a whisper of terror in every dark corner of the galaxy. Kane himself led these broadcasts, his face calm and his voice unyielding as he addressed the galaxy. "You feared us once," he said, staring into the cameras as if he could see every soul that watched him. "You locked us away because you could not control us. You believed that time would make us weak. But in the dark, we grew stronger. And now, we have returned, not as conquerors, but as the reckoning you all deserve." These broadcasts had a devastating effect on the morale of the Alliance. The other races, who had believed humanity to be little more than a legend, now saw with their own eyes what true warfare looked like. Terror swept through the ranks of the Alliance. Seasoned warriors trembled at the thought of facing humanity on the battlefield. The unstoppable force that had devastated so much of the galaxy fall to their knees in a matter of days. Humanity's strategy went beyond mere destruction. They were systematically dismantling the Xynar's war machine. They targeted supply lines with ruthless efficiency, cutting off the Xynar's resources and sabotaging their manufacturing worlds. Infiltrators disguised as Xynar slaves spread chaos from within, disrupting communication and spreading false orders that led to disastrous counterattacks. They didn't just win battles, they crippled the Xynar's entire infrastructure, turning their own weapons against them. Where the Alliance's tactics were predictable, humanity's were fluid, ever-changing, as if the battlefield were an intricate dance, and they knew all the steps. They used quantum encryption to mask their communications, making it impossible for the Xynar to intercept or predict their moves. They harnessed the energy of entire star systems, turning even the galaxy itself into a weapon. Planets were mined for their core elements, their mass converted into fuel for weapons that could rewrite the fabric of existence. Humanity's victories did not go unnoticed by the rest of the galaxy. The races of the Alliance, once united in their fear of humanity, now found themselves at a crossroads. The Xynar were their common enemy, yet the tide had turned so drastically that they feared they had traded one monster for another. Whispers began to circulate among the galactic leaders. What if humanity was not content to merely defeat the Xynar? What if they desired more? For humanity, the thought of an alliance meant nothing more than a temporary convenience. They had no interest in rejoining a community that had exiled them. Darius Kane made it clear that humanity had not returned to ask for forgiveness or seek a place among the stars. They had come to claim what was theirs. They were no longer the forgotten race, the exiles in the dark. They were now the predators, the rightful rulers of the galaxy's future. Kane's orders were clear. We do not merely destroy the Xynar, we reshape the galaxy itself. Every star, every planet, every species will remember why humanity was once locked away. We will carve our names into the very stars themselves, so that even the darkest reaches of space tremble at the thought of our fury. As the war raged on, humanity became a force of nature, a storm that consumed everything in its path. Their fleets operated with a unity and purpose that defied all expectations. They turned star systems into burning graves, their tactics so precise and so brutal that entire species knelt before them, pledging their allegiance not out of loyalty but sheer terror. The Xynar Dominion, once the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, was reduced to a hunted remnant, their mighty empire shattered into splintered factions. Humanity's rage had not only turned the tide, It had rewritten the rules of the cosmos. They showed the galaxy that there was no weapon more powerful than a species denied its destiny, no army more relentless than one that has risen from the ashes of betrayal. And so, humanity stood on the brink of ultimate victory, their enemies scattered and broken, the galaxy itself bowing to their might. The Alliance watched in horrified awe as they realized the truth. They had not just unleashed a powerful ally to combat the Xynar, they had awakened the beast that could never again be caged. Humanity had become not just a force of war, but a legend reborn, eternal, unstoppable, and unforgiving. As the war against the Xynar raged on, the legend of humanity's return spread like a wildfire, igniting a mixture of awe, fear, and respect across the galaxy. Once dismissed as myths or old tales, humanity was now a name that every soldier, every civilian, and every leader of the Alliance spoke with bated breath. Their resurgence was more than a return to the galactic stage, it was a conquest of the stars themselves, a reclaiming of a destiny that had been denied for centuries. Humanity's soldiers were not mere combatants, they were living symbols of unyielding ferocity. Stories spread like echoes through the galaxies, whispered in the shadows of distant planets, and carried across the light of dying suns. Tales of entire Xynar fleets abandoning the fight at the mere sight of a human battlecruiser grew to mythical proportions. There were reports of Xynar commanders ordering full retreats the moment they detected the quantum signatures of humanity's warships, preferring to face the unknown perils of space rather than the certain death that awaited them at the hands of these unstoppable predators. The fear of human soldiers became a weapon in itself. They were like phantoms on the battlefield, appearing where least expected and striking with a precision that defied all attempts to counter them. The Xynar, once a terror that blotted out stars, now found themselves on the receiving end of a force they could not understand or predict. The Alliance soldiers, once skeptical of humanity's return, now looked upon their allies with a mixture of admiration and horror. They saw the humans not just as warriors, but as something more, apex predators that had adapted to the darkness of their exile and returned more deadly than ever. Human soldiers seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to read the battlefield. They anticipated enemy movements with uncanny precision, set traps that ensnared even the most cunning Xynar tacticians, and executed battle plans that felt more like orchestrated symphonies of slaughter. To the Xynar, these humans were relentless shadows, always one step ahead, always striking at the most vulnerable point. For the elders of the Intergalactic Alliance, what had once been a distant fear was now a living nightmare. They had sealed humanity away because they feared their potential for chaos, their unpredictable nature, and their insatiable thirst for conquest. Now that same species had become their savior, the one force capable of stopping the Xynar's genocidal rampage. Yet as humanity's victories piled up and their dominance grew, the dread in the elders' hearts only deepened. The galaxy's leaders, who once thought they held humanity's leash, now found themselves in a position of desperate dependence. They feared that when the fires of this war finally burned out, humanity's rage would not be sated. The Alliance had gambled on releasing the beast they had caged, and the stakes were now higher than they ever imagined. They whispered in their closed chambers, voices filled with a terror they dared not speak aloud. What happens when humanity turns its gaze upon us? The culmination of this galactic war came at the distant edges of the galaxy, near the gravitational well of a dying star. The system known as Nix 9 became the staging ground for what would be the most decisive and brutal battle in living memory. It was here, on the brink of a collapsing sun, that the Xynar Dominion made their last stand, pouring the remnants of their once invincible fleet into a final, desperate attempt to survive. Darius Kane stood at the helm of the Revenant, the flagship of humanity's fleet, his eyes fixed on the horizon of fire and steel. Beside him, holographic displays lit up with real-time feeds of the battle, showing the chaotic dance of warships, the disintegration of entire fleets, and the death throes of the Xynar war machine. His expression was carved from stone, his gaze as cold and unyielding as the void itself. "All forces advance," Kane ordered, his voice echoing through the comm channels of every ship in the human armada. His words were calm, almost indifferent, as if this destruction was a mere formality. And in truth, it was. The humans did not fight this battle. They orchestrated it. The Revenant led the charge, its singularity cannons tearing open the Xynar's defenses like a hot blade through flesh. Waves of strike drones poured from the human vessels, their AI-linked networks communicating with lethal efficiency, dismantling Xynar technology in the blink of an eye. The drones moved like a storm of metallic locusts, devouring everything in their path, turning the Xynar's once mighty ships into drifting tombs. The Xynar unleashed their deadliest weapons in a futile bid to halt the human onslaught. Their energy lances carved through space, their plasma barrages igniting the blackness with dazzling brilliance. But for every human ship that fell, 10 Xynar vessels disintegrated in the counterattack. Humanity's war strategy was relentless, a perfect symphony of death, each move orchestrated to ensure maximum devastation. The star of Nix-9 began to die as the battle reached its climax, collapsing into itself, casting off waves of radiation and gravity ripples that tore through the battlefield. And yet, in the heart of this cosmic storm, humanity fought like they were born from the chaos itself. The Revenant's silhouette was bathed in the star's dying light, like a harbinger of doom looming over the remnants of the Xynar. As the last Xynar dreadnought disintegrated into nothingness, Kane's voice boomed through the galaxy-wide comm channels. "The Xynar Dominion is no more," he declared, his tone devoid of triumph or mercy, only the cold finality of a predator who has secured its prey. "We have reclaimed our place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as rightful rulers. Let the galaxy know that humanity has returned, and we have not forgotten the chains that once bound us." The galaxy stood in stunned silence as the aftermath of humanity's wrath settled across the stars. The Xynar were defeated, their empire shattered, their very name now synonymous with failure. The galaxy had been saved from the brink of annihilation, yet there was no celebration, no sigh of relief from the Alliance. Instead, there was only the creeping realization that they had unleashed a force even more fearsome than the enemy they had just vanquished. Whispers spread through the halls of power on every planet, from the crystalline spires of the Vrokik's Dominion to the bioorganics cities of the Ukri. What happens when the hunters become the hunted? What happens when humanity no longer needs the Alliance? Alliance leaders spoke in hushed tones, contemplating strategies that could never come to fruition. They had believed they could control humanity, guide their rage, and channel their destructive tendencies against their common enemy. But now, faced with the true extent of humanity's might, they realized their mistake. You cannot command a storm. You can only endure it. Darius Kane became more than just a military leader. He became a living legend, a symbol of humanity's ruthless return to power. In his hands, humanity had not just defeated the Xynar. They had redefined what it meant to wage war. He stood as a reminder to the galaxy of the price of betrayal. His image beamed across countless worlds as a warning and a promise. Every word Kane spoke resonated through the cosmos like a bell tolling for the damned. "This galaxy once turned its back on us, locked us in the dark," he said in one of his many addresses. "But the darkness is where we learned to thrive. We are the predators, the forgotten hunters, and now we have reclaimed our hunting grounds." His face was etched into the minds of every alien species, not as a hero or a villain, but as the embodiment of humanity's unbroken will. The galaxy now stood in uneasy allegiance with the very species they once caged, wondering if they had merely traded one nightmare for another. As the dust of war began to settle, a new era dawned in the galaxy, an era with humanity at its helm. Planets that had once feared the Xynar now turned their eyes to Earth, not in reverence but in dread. The alliance that had united to survive was now united in its silent terror of what humanity might do next. They had become the predators of the stars, and every shadow of space seemed to whisper their name. The galaxy had witnessed the fury of humanity, and they would never forget. The question that now haunted the cosmos was not whether humanity would turn its wrath upon them, but when, and the galaxy trembled, knowing that when that time came, there would be no force in the universe capable of stopping them. For humanity had become the ultimate predators of the stars, reclaiming their rightful place, not just as warriors, but as the undisputed masters of a galaxy that could no longer deny their existence. The defeat of the Xenar was meant to herald an era of peace for the galaxy. The Alliance's fractured civilizations should have been celebrating their survival, their relief palpable in every corner of the cosmos. But instead, the galaxy found itself in the grip of a new, more profound fear. The fear of humanity unbound. For centuries, the galaxy had thought of humanity as a distant memory, a legend locked away behind an impenetrable barrier. But now that barrier was shattered, and humanity stood at the center of it all. An unstoppable force awakened from its exile. With the Xenar reduced to nothing more than cosmic dust, the Alliance had no choice but to acknowledge the reality they had created. Humanity's rise was not just a return. It was a reclamation of their place in the stars, a deliberate reminder that they were no longer bound by the shackles of the past. Every world in the Alliance knew their names, not as saviors, but as the predators who had been let loose from their cages. The cosmic whispers grew louder with each passing day, spreading across planets, moons, and space stations alike. The humans were no longer just feared. They were revered as a force of nature, an inevitable storm that swept through the galaxy. They were no longer the lost species. They were the ones who had been wronged, and now they were coming back to collect on an ancient debt. The scene in the grand chambers of the Council of Elders was one of unease, masked by ceremonial grace. The Elders, who once presided over the galaxy with an air of invincibility, now sat in silence as Darius Kane, Supreme Commander of the Human Forces, entered the hall. He didn't enter as a guest or an ally. He entered as a force to be reckoned with, the embodiment of humanity's collective rage and ambition. The ancient chamber, usually filled with the whispered deliberations of the galaxy's most powerful beings, fell silent in his presence. Kane's gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of the galaxy's most influential leaders, species that once thought themselves unchallenged in their supremacy. His very presence was a statement. Humanity had not just survived, they had thrived. His face was impassive, but his eyes burned with a fire that spoke of unyielding resolve. "You sealed us away because you were afraid," Kane began, his voice reverberating through the vaulted ceilings of the council chamber, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. "And now, you know why. You feared what we could become. You feared our chaos, our unpredictability, our ability to turn even the most certain of battles into slaughter. The galaxy forgot who we were, but we did not forget who wronged us." The Alliance, bound by fear and desperation, knew they had no choice. They extended an offer that they hoped would pacify the beast they had awoken, a seat on the Council of Elders, an unprecedented gesture of peace, respect, and most importantly, necessity. It was not given out of goodwill, but as an act of sheer survival. They needed humanity's strength to face the uncertainties of the future, but they feared humanity's wrath even more. The Alliance was caught in the paradox of their own making. They needed their saviors, yet they dreaded the cost of that salvation. Kane's acceptance of the seat was calculated, a move that hinted at patience, strategy, and a deeper game that humanity intended to play. They had the power to crush their enemies, but they chose, for now, to keep their swords sheathed. They would play the long game, biding their time, building their influence from within. They knew that revenge was best served cold, and humanity's hunger for vengeance was not easily sated. Kane turned to the silent assembly, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of a threat unspoken. "You believe that by giving us this seat, you have balanced the scales, that you have earned our gratitude. Let me assure you, this is not forgiveness. This is merely the beginning. We accepted your terms, not out of mercy, but because we understand the value of patience. The galaxy may have forgotten us once, but never again." The words of Darius Kane were more than a warning. They were a promise. "We are the darkness at the edge of your vision," he continued, his eyes locking onto each elder with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "The storm on the horizon that you can neither outrun nor contain. And when we will come not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as predators reclaiming what is ours." The council chamber seemed to grow colder as his words echoed, each syllable sinking into the consciousness of every being present. The galaxy's leaders, who once thought they had seen the worst of the universe in the Xenar, now realized they had never truly understood the meaning of terror. Kane's declaration was not just for the Council. It was a message sent to every corner of the galaxy, a warning to all who dared to cross humanity's path in the future. Humanity did not seek immediate revenge against the Alliance. They had evolved beyond the simplicity of rage-driven conquest. They were now tacticians playing a grand game of cosmic chess. The galaxy's eyes were upon them, watching, waiting, speculating on their next move. But humanity was patient. They were meticulous in their planning. They knew that the greatest victories were those achieved not just by force, but by strategy, manipulation, and an understanding of their enemy's deepest fears. While the Alliance believed they had contained humanity's fury by giving them a seat on the Council, they failed to understand one crucial truth. Humanity did not want to rule the stars. They wanted to own them. They would turn their exile into a tale of transformation, their vengeance into a strategic plan that spanned generations. As Kane turned to leave the chamber, his silhouette framed by the fading light of the ancient hall, the galaxy knew they had witnessed the rebirth of a legend. He left them with one final warning, a sentence that would be etched into the history of the cosmos. The galaxy may have forgotten us once, but never again. We are not just the hunters who return to claim our place. We are the architects of the new order. The legend of humanity was reborn, not as the forgotten, broken species they once were, but as the ultimate hunters who had returned to reshape the cosmos in their own image. Their exile had only made them stronger, more focused, more relentless. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to rewrite the destiny of every star and every planet that dared to exist in their shadow. The galaxy trembled under the weight of this new reality. Planets that had once looked down on humanity now bowed to their authority, not out of loyalty or respect, but out of sheer primal fear. Entire civilizations recalibrated their political strategies, their military doctrines, and their alliances, all with the sole aim of avoiding humanity's wrath. They had seen what humanity was capable of. They had witnessed their transformation from prey to predator. The Alliance's power structures, once rigid and seemingly unbreakable, began to show cracks. The ancient species that ruled from ivory towers now looked over their shoulders, haunted by the specter of a vengeance they could never predict. They had once been the unchallenged masters of the cosmos, but now they were nothing more than chess pieces in humanity's grand design. Darius Kane's final words resonated across the stars, a declaration of humanity's new role in the galaxy. We are not conquerors. We are not invaders. We are something far more terrifying. We are the forgotten ones, the predators who have come back from the shadows, and we are here to remind you of the darkness you sought to erase. His voice became a legend, echoing through space and time, reaching every distant world that had once dismissed humanity as a relic of the past. Kane had become more than a leader. He was a myth, a force of nature, a symbol of humanity's inevitable return to power. His name would be whispered in reverence and fear across countless galaxies, a reminder that those who were forgotten are often the most dangerous to remember. The dawn of this new era was not marked by the ringing of bells or the raising of flags, but by the silent acknowledgement of a truth that could not be denied. Humanity had become the apex predators of the galaxy. No longer the outcasts, no longer the forgotten, they had risen to reclaim their destiny with a ferocity and determination that the universe had never before seen. They were not merely players in the cosmic game. They were now its architects, its rulers, its defining force. The galaxy could only watch in silence, their fate now tied to the whims of the predators they had once dared to imprison. For humanity had returned, not just to survive, but to reshape the very fabric of the universe itself. And as the stars bore witness to their resurgence, one thing became clear. The galaxy may have forgotten humanity once, but never again. They are the darkness reborn, the storm that will never pass, and the predators who now own the stars. If you like this story, please press the like button and subscribe. It encourages me to write more stories. Thank you.